Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and people watching on YouTube. This is the Development Control meeting of Tuesday the 16th of February. Do I have any apologies for absence?
I have apologies from Councillor Sims, Chair.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest, please?
Sorry, Chair, can I put an apologies for Councillor Willie Latter, please?
Yes. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. We turn to the first item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which is the Tuesday, the 19th of January. Do we have any comments, questions or queries on this, or can I have a proposal, please? Councillor Addison?
Opposed, Chair.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Isles? All those in favour? Moving the minutes. Thank you. So the minutes are so moved. We move now to the first item on the agenda. I do hope you can stay with us, Anne. Unfortunately tonight, if anybody does leave the meeting for whatever reason, of councillors I'm talking to now, then they will not be able to join in any discussions on the item that they left from, even if they manage to come back, and neither will they be allowed to vote. The first item on the agenda is application number 20/00458/COU, the proposed residential caravan site for 6 Gypsy Traveller families on land south of Oakley Park at Ashley Road, Middleton. Edward, are you going to present that this evening?
I'm going to present that one, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Madam Chair, thank you very much. This application is for a change of use, and it's for proposed residential caravan site for 6 Gypsy Traveller families on land south of Oakley Park at Ashley Road, Middleton. Tunde, could I have the first slide, please, which is the OS extract? Thank you very much. Madam Chair and members, as you can see, this is the location plan showing the proposed subject site. Slide number 4, please, Tunde. And this is the site layout plan as proposed by the applicant. The site, as you know, members, is located off Ashley Road on the western side of the road, approximately 250 meters to the north of Middleton Village. The land lies within open countryside and is adjacent to an existing site to the north, which benefits from planning permission for use of the land to provide 3-number gypsy pitches under 2 appeal decisions. And the site is currently subject to a planning appeal for an additional pitch that would take the capacity of that site up to 4 pitches. However, this is a separate site and cannot be co-joined with the site which is the subject of this application. So the subject site is bound to the east by Ashley Road and by fields to the southern and western boundaries. Access to the site is gained at the southeastern corner of the site from Ashley Road. The Middleton wastewater treatment works is opposite the site to the northeast on Ashley Road, and there is a bungalow approximately 90 meters to the northwest of the site. The site is currently vacant, although it was observed from a recent site visit that some works had been undertaken, including the removal of hedges. The applicant seeks permission for a residential caravan site for 6 Gypsy Traveller families on this subject site. They're also seeking planning permission for the improvement of the existing field access and the laying of additional permeable hard standing and the installation of a packaged sewage plant for foul drainage. If I could, members, just go on to the next slide, which would touch on the key determining issues. So the principle of development is for a change of use, and it comprises 6 pitches, including the laying of hard stand, erection of 6 ancillary amenity buildings and access improvement. The site is located outside the built-up area of the Middleton village within the open countryside and is identified as agricultural land. The information provided by the applicant is somewhat limited. The issues to do with the details on the status of the proposed users is still an issue to be considered by officers and the decision maker, the local planning authority. But it's the view of officers that if that further probe was required, we could do it by way of condition, as Annex 1 of the Planning Policy for Travellers provides for this sort of definition of gypsies and allows for this process. So from a planning point of view, the proposal is compliant with Policy 31 of the Joint Core Strategy, and the application is seen to be compliant with the development plan. So it is permissible to grant permission subject to conditions if members were reliant upon Policy 31, which gives sufficient weight to the decision maker to grant consent for this proposal. In terms of the design and visual impact, it's deemed that the site is fairly well contained. And again, it meets the requirements of Policy 8 of the Joint Core Strategy. In terms of residential amenity, the development is considered to create no undue impact on the amenities of the nearest residents. With regards to highways, the local highways authority has not objected to the proposal, but has indicated in effect what it would want to see by way of condition applied to any consent that members may be minded to grant for the proposal. So members, if I could say that on balance, with regards to highways, officers are satisfied that the inclusion of suitably worded conditions could secure the details with regards to access. And the issues to do with flood risk, mainly drainage, I think can be dealt with by way of the conditions. There are 19 conditions that officers have set out with this proposal. So, Madam Chair, if I could rest here, because I know that there are a number of speakers that wish to speak to this application. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to add, the recommendation from officers is for approval, subject to 19 conditions that are set out in the officer's report.
Thank you, Edward. Once we've removed the shared screen. Thank you. I'd like to call the first speaker, David Sims. You will have 3 minutes from when you start to speak. Bear with me one moment while I set up my timer. Right, we're fine. Councillor Sims is speaking on behalf of residents, I believe.
Thank you, Chair and Committee, for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. Now, this proposal is out of scale and not in keeping to its surroundings, so with no connectivity to local amenities. It also places a heavy unsustainable burden in one location, which is a contravention of policy. The proposal would have a negative impact on the landscape and is out of keeping with the character of the area. It is also outside the village boundary with no connecting footpath on a 60-mile-an-hour unlit country road. The officer's report actually states the development is in an open countryside, and therefore, in my view, it should be treated as such. Officers have the report from the local highways authority, which outlines their concerns, but they seem to be disregarding this. I disagree. What price do you put on someone's life? Now, recurring to the JCS policy 31, I actually disagree with what's just been said. I don't think it does comply. For example, section 43 talks about gypsies and travellers. Referring to F, health and well-being, do not put occupants at risk, including through unsafe access to the site. This certainly does not comply. Councillors, you have the report in front of you with reference to paragraph 6.26 in the report when it talks about no more than 5 residential units of a single drive. There are some examples in the county where this has been breached, but some principles apply. Two wrongs do not make a right. It's also, we do not know the historic breaches are when they were taken. The previous appeals that we've had, you have to ask yourself, were these appeals before the current JCS policies? However, they are not a precedent matter and should not be applied as a blanket response. Applications should always be treated in their sustainability. Now, again, referring to the report with reference to paragraph 6.3, and the report, officers seem to be relying on enforcement control to manage development impacts. That is not a good place to be. And I'm actually surprised in this. This is actually in the report. 19 conditions, incredible. Interestingly, do you see any comments from the Welland Valley Partnership Trust in this report? I have thought they would have been consulted to ask if they have any concerns, especially about the nitrate levels, which is an issue in the upper regions of the river. If they haven't been consulted, then they certainly should have been. Now, on the 5-year supply, this is an issue. However, it does not mean all relevant policies are out of date and not applicable. In these circumstances, applications still require to be treated on their own merits and suitability. Therefore, after due consideration of all these policies and other policies, having read the report, I would strongly refuse this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect timing, Councillor Sims.
Thank you.
The next person to speak is Councillor Anne Morgan from Ashley Parish Council.
Sorry, just need to unmute.
Lovely. You have 3 minutes, my darling.
Great.
From when you start.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to note that we were pleased to see that on this occasion, the application to extend the provision of caravan sites on the land to the south of Oakley Park has been made in accordance with standard planning procedures, that is to say, not retrospectively. Nevertheless, and in spite of the planning officer's recommendation to approve this application, it is the shared view of Ashley Parish Council that this application should be refused for the following reasons. Firstly, the recommendation to approve the application appears to be unduly weighted in favour of the need for additional gypsy and traveller pitches in the Corby area. The planning officer's report gives a clear impression that other legitimate planning considerations are in this case subordinate. Furthermore, the planning officers list 19 planning conditions which we believe are largely incapable of being enforced, and therefore the recommendation to approve the application is materially unsafe. Secondly, there are already 2 established traveller sites in the close vicinity, Little Meadow and Oakley Park. If the Oakley Park extension currently under appeal is approved, the application before the committee would be the 4th in the immediate vicinity of Middleton and Cottingham. We believe that development of this size contravenes paragraph 14 of the planning policy for traveller sites, which provides that the scale of sites in rural settings must not dominate the settled community nor place undue pressure on the local infrastructure. The planning policy for travellers also makes it clear that planning authorities should strictly limit new traveller sites in the open countryside. Nor do we believe that this current application complies with the joint core strategy, which was adopted in 2016 and which sets out the criteria against which applications for new gypsy and traveller sites should be considered. The current application relies heavily on past appeal decisions to support its case. However, these appeal decisions predate the adoption of the joint core strategy in 2016 and the planning policy for traveller sites, which was issued in 2015, and therefore must surely now carry less weight. We would also like to point out that Corby's Part 2 local plan was not in place when the previous appeals were upheld. The local plan clearly states that sewage plants are bad neighbours. Indeed, it has been acknowledged by the planning inspectorate, no less, back in 2012, that this location will, on occasion, be adversely affected by odour emissions. Since then, the village has grown and the load on the water treatment works has increased. The present application does not address the protection of the health and safety of residents in this regard, and no odour assessment has been submitted. We feel sure that the committee would not consider approving the building of a house on this site due to the likely odour emissions, and it should therefore not be approving a site for another 6 traveller families to live here.
Can you please draw to a close, because you've had your
final point, a more general point, which is that there is a requirement that the same standards of amenity should be applied to a traveller site as for other residential uses. So erection of a 2-metre high wooden boundary fencing, which would have a detrimental impact on the rural character of the area around 1 or more houses in this location, we suspect would not be permitted by the planning committee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I now call on David Grayson, Councillor David Grayson, Chair of Cottingham Parish Council.
Thank you. My understanding is that the Highways Authority did not support this application on the grounds of highway safety. Ashley Road is a narrow edge-lined road with no verges, no local speed restriction. Information about the application, about the plans for a gateway to the site is limited, and the narrow road mitigates against safe access for both touring vans and the delivery of mobile homes. The entrance is close to a bend with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, and a number of manoeuvres will be required to larger vans to enter the site, thus blocking the road. There is no pavement along this road, which is unlit and is the only route available for some villages into Middleton. If only on the grounds of safety, we're surprised that the planning office would ignore this advice. There is already a traveller's site, Little Meadow, on the Corby Road out of Cottingham, and now a proposal to extend Oakley Park. Section C of the government planning policy for travellers' sites states that when assessing sites in rural areas, planning authorities should ensure that they do not dominate the nearest settlement. Policy H states that planning authorities should avoid placing undue pressure on local infrastructure. It is questionable whether the infrastructure in Middleton could allow for even a moderate growth in population. And as an example, the nearest school, Cottingham Primary, has a single form entry intake of only 20. The same policy states that local authorities should attach weight to sites being properly landscaped to enhance the environment and increase openness. They should not be enclosed with so much hard landscaping or fences to give the impression that the sites and its residents are cut off from the community. There has been no attempt at landscaping of this site or its boundaries, and the introduction of odd standing across the site is in direct contravention of this policy, as is the proposal for a 2-metre high wooden fence bounding that site. Covering the site with hardcore will exacerbate existing problems with water runoff. Surrounding fields are already suffering from waterlogging and are becoming unusable following the recent extension of hardcore across the whole of an Oakley Park, which has inadequate drainage arrangements. Whilst the parish council accepts that further pitches are required within Corby Borough, there is no evidence that brownfield sites and those closer to a range of public amenities have been explored as an alternative to siting them in this rural greenfield, which is in contravention of so many county and national policies. Adopting new sites with the raison d'etre that the council is short of sites is not planning but opportunism. And we urge the councillors to reject this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we now have Councillor Sarah Brandt, Chair of Middleton Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. In considering this application, the Environment Agency has made clear that it doesn't support the use of private sewage arrangements on this site and that it should be linked to the main sewage system. It's obvious to everyone that if a private sewage system supporting 6 families were to fail, it would lead to contamination, which would have serious consequences given the watercourses running either side of the site. The Welland River is only 500 metres away. There's also the matter of the floodplain, which for most of the winter months brings river water to within 250 metres of the site. I think we can safely assume that this will creep closer in future as the climate gets warmer and wetter. This means that contamination escaping from a private sewage system would reach the river very quickly indeed. In addition to this, for years, the village has been prone to flash flooding from water running off the fields at the top of the escarpment, down through the village and along the Ashley Road to the river. The most recent occasion in December, water poured down the Ashley Road, flooded this field, flooded this site and Oakley Park next to it, which lost its power and the road had to be closed. Now, this is not exceptional. I know planning officers have said this is exceptional, but this stretch of the Ashley Road has become a flood hotspot in recent years, and it's been registered as such by the Flood Resilience Project way before the December event. The reality of climate change tells us this is going to happen more and more, not less frequently. This really isn't a sustainable site for development. Of course, flood risk is just one issue, but it's going to be exacerbated, as people have already said, by the covering of hard standing. And it also underscores the need for the site to be hooked up to mains drainage to limit the chance of environmental disaster. Contamination will be a real danger in our view if the planning authority ignores Environment Agency advice about sewage disposal. Another comment that nobody's mentioned yet, worthy of note, was the response from the police about this application. The police propose that any planning permission is specific to named individuals, that only named individuals shall reside on the site, and that permission should lapse if the named individuals leave the site, and that the application should address only the needs for traveller pitches for people with local connections. For some reason, this important stipulation from the police has been completely ignored by the planning officers in the conditions that they're proposing. And I think Mr. Oteng did make some reference to it earlier. In fact, in their report, they acknowledge no details of the gypsy and traveller status of the proposed users have been provided with the application. If you approve this site and the matter of who uses it is not properly addressed, this will become a caravan park where vans are rented out to all comers, and the local authority will be no further forward in meeting the needs of this important minority group.
Thank you. Can you round up, please, Sarah?
I think it's very telling that the officer's recommendations have 19 substantive conditions. They're necessary because of the omissions in the application. The problem is that these conditions are not enforceable, and many of them aren't sufficiently detailed. Councillors, this application is deeply flawed and unsafe for all the reasons that the speakers have outlined. And on behalf of residents of Middleton, I urge you to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have John Grove, please? I believe you're a planner.
I am, Chair. Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address members. I'm John Groves, a Chartered Town Planner and a former Chief Planning Officer representing Middleton Parish Council. I appreciate the challenge of this type of application and understand the issues which the Council has to face. But in this instance, I consider that the material provided for you by me, albeit very briefly summarised in your report, by Middleton and other parish councils represents a cogent and well-balanced argument against granting planning permission, one soundly based on material planning issues. As always, this type of decision relies on balancing competing issues, and in this case, for Gypsy and Traveller accommodation against a very clear set of development plan-based objections. Unfortunately, and with the greatest of respect, I think the recommendation before you represents an incorrect balancing of those issues, and the application should be refused. How do I reach this conclusion? Critically, I look at your own development plan policies, and then I conclude the following. Your officers ignore the advice of your own highways advisors, assuming traffic speeds which have not been measured, and therefore identify a threat to highway safety and seek to apply a standard for residential development which this site is not. Approval would accept a substandard and unsafe access. The site is totally unsustainable locationally, down a narrow road with no lighting or footpath and without speed limit. There is absolutely no evidence to demonstrate that the site can be adequately drained or that sewage can be properly managed. Even packaged treatment plants require discharge. The application gives no indication as to how the two sites together can operate, how outflows are managed, and discharge potentially via outfall and watercourses beyond the site boundary are dealt with. Conditional approval does not provide the necessary information for you to make a decision on this matter. There is no assessment of the cumulative impact of the two Gypsy and Traveller sites which would be operating side by side if planning permission is granted. The potential concerns over the impact of placing residential accommodation next to a sewage works are not addressed other than by a sentence about prevailing wind direction. There is no professional or technically qualified appraisal. The NPPF expects the decision maker to avoid granting planning permission for development which might later give rise to new residents complaining about an established operation which causes nuisance. It is worth noting that Anglian Water operators on the site would be required to wear respirators and other safety equipment while operating on the site in short periods. The inspector, considering the emerging local plan at last year's examination, questioned the approach applied to the consideration of Gypsy and Travellers provision, resulting in the commission of a fresh assessment, the result of which is unknown.
Can you please?
Yes, Chair. Development of the nature proposed, especially in combination with that already existing, results in a dramatic change to the setting of recognised areas of conservation, the Cottingham and Middleton Conservation Area, and the wider landscape setting of the Welland Valley. Each of these concerns can be related to relevant development plan policy, and the refusal to grant planning permission can be fully justified. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Chair. I will now remove our guests back into the waiting room, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the officers, please? Councillor Alison DL, followed by Councillor Dady.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions because I think there was a couple of things which repeatedly came up in those concerns, really. The first thing is around the access to the site and the fact that there isn't a footpath. along that road, along the Ashley Road into the site. I just wonder if that's a concern at all. And secondly, around the close proximity to the River Welland and whether there is any likelihood that it would cause a persistent flood risk, really. So I just wondered if somebody could comment on those two.
If I may respond to Councillor DL.
I'm having trouble with your sound, Edward. You sound like you've swallowed gravel.
Can you hear me now?
No, it's still very...
Can you hear me?
Just about, but it's hard to decipher what you're saying because the sound's really poor.
Sit back from your mic. Sit back and you speak.
Can you hear me now?
Not really, no. We know you're speaking, but it's very difficult because it sounds very distorted.
How about now?
No.
Edward, sorry, Chair, can I suggest you may want to log out and log back in, and if that clears it.
Thank you.
Bear with me. Can you hear me now?
That's much better, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In response to Councillor DL's two questions, with regards to the footpath access, it would be excessive on the local planning authority to ask the applicant to effectively provide the infrastructure of a footpath leading to the subject site. And with regards to the flooding issues to the River Welland, we would be guided by the Environment Agency. And there hasn't been any adverse response to the issue of flooding from the Environment Agency.
Thank you, Edward. Does that answer your questions at all, Councillor DL? Councillor Dady, did you put your hand up then, Councillor Watt? I'll have you after Councillor Dady. After Councillor Dady, yep.
Right, thank you. Yes, I've got two questions. One is on the slideshow, if you like. One of the first pages, one looks like that, if maybe you want to find that on the screen. But it shows a sort of orangey red rectangle, then another red and pink one that's like a dotted line or section. Now that dotted speckledy one, I'm thinking is the proposed site. So what's the purpose of that other rectangle that's highlighted there? Is there more of the site that might be developed or could be developed or is owned by the same people or something? Basically, I want more clarification of what this diagram means. And the second thing, I'm wondering if one of the planning officers could confirm or perhaps talk about a bit more what one of our speakers talked about in relation to the police's advice or position or policy and how apparently we're going against that by approving this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dady, with regards to the diagram, I think the focus should be on the red line boundary. That's the matter that's before you. Anything outside that is not part of your consideration. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. I just wondered why that was marked separately and I didn't know if it was related to it or not. So that's all. Thank you.
Now, with regards to the question of going against the police's advice, the authorities or the officer's response would be that we would be guided by the comments and observations of the crime prevention officer, who is a time-served police officer that works on a number of issues in terms of applications with the authority, and officers would look to his expertise. So he has been consulted and is aware, and he hasn't given adverse comments. So I'm not sure where the parish councillor gets this notion that we've gone against police advice. The local constabulary is represented because we've engaged with the crime prevention officer, who is a time-served police officer and has long been with the authority and advises officers on development issues and crime prevention issues. And if there was anything that officers were putting in their report that was contrary to advice from the local constabulary, he would have been the first person to point that out to us.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Daly?
It does, yes. I do have other concerns, but they're not questions, so
Okay.
I've no need to air them now.
Let's have a word with Councillor Bridget Watts, please.
Thank you, Chair. Edward, I just would like to ask you if, well, there's a, if I was to own this land and I wanted to put a four-storey, a four-bedroom family home on it, would I get planning permission for that?
Councillor Watt, unfortunately, it's a supposition that for the interest of the decision maker, I'm not at liberty to comment on, because it's not a matter before us. So what I would say is, so my short answer with respect to your question is, if you do acquire such a site and you want to put in an application for a dwelling house on it, I would say then it would be a matter for us to test the policies and the, if you like, the merits of your submission. But in terms of a supposition, I'm limited to providing you with a response that compares with the matter that's before you. You know, the matter that's before us is the matter that's before us. Unfortunately, I can't comment on a supposition.
But the question is about it being agricultural land.
Yeah, I think, Councillor, what you've got to realise is that there are different grades of agricultural land. If it was agricultural land with high versatility, suitable for agricultural purposes, it would not be in its current vacant state, and would have not allowed a prospective occupier or purchaser to acquire that for this sort of scheme. Because again, Natural England would have been consulted and they would have drawn our attention to that.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else?
Thank you.
Councillor Watt.
Sorry, can I just interject, Councillor Riley? Councillor Addison and Councillor Isles have been waiting with their blue hands.
I do beg your pardon. Councillor Addison.
I give way.
Isles and Councillor Watt. We'll try and fit you all in. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Councillor Addison.
I think Councillor Isles was first, Chair, for me.
Okay, Councillor Isles.
Giving way to age, Jean. Refer you to 4.5. It's the environment age on private sewers. As a site is, and you look at the last paragraph before overcoming our objection, it says here that in these cases, if an applicant decides to apply a water discharge permit for private facilities, we are likely to refuse that permit. And then I go on to 642, and this does surprise me from officers. It does state in that although no details have been provided for a packaged treatment plant, officers are satisfied with the argument put forward. Surely officers would want to see the details of this plant to be built on the site. And can you ask me why, when the environment age said they wouldn't give a permit unless the applicant proves to them about the viability, that officers suddenly turn around and say, although there's no details been provided, they're satisfied with their applicant's argument? That I don't understand.
Okay, Councillor, thank you very much for your question. A very good question. What I would like to draw your attention to is condition 16, firstly, which is a pre-occupation condition. And basically what it says is that the details of the provision of wastewater drainage are necessary prior to commencement of development to prevent pollution of the water environment in accordance with policy 5 of the JCS. So, Councillor Isles, it's not as if we've completely omitted to consider the issue of drainage and the treatment of foul water. It's been dealt with by way of condition, and that is a pre-occupation condition. So before anybody gets onto the site to live on it as their residents, if you like, in their respective pitches, those details would come forward to us as an authority, and we would consult the Environment Agency, and we would be guided by the technical advice of the Environment Agency. And until they're satisfied, the Environment Agency is satisfied that the details are adequate, there would be no occupation. So I hope I've answered your question, Councillor.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, please.
You know, because surely part of the whole plan, because they can do all the groundwork and everything and build buildings, put caravans on it, but nobody lives in them, yet they haven't got a permit of the Environment Agency. And I think before anything commences, there should be a permit in place if they are using a private sewer system. They have to prove that they can't connect to the sewage system. Cost effectiveness of it, it's going to cost too much for them to do. But I'm sure if a development was there, they'd have to apply to join up to the sewage system that's already there. So I don't think anything should go ahead without that permit in place. That's just a comment on what you've said.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say I support Councillor Isles on that question, because the waste situation does give me grave concerns over pollution, etc. And I think that's been well voiced tonight. Going back to Councillor Davies' question, I would be interested to know what the blocked out, it looks red on my plan, is, because I'm considering the road safety, and I would like to know if there's any buildings or constructions in that red block.
The site is vacant, Councillor Addison.
Vacant as in not developed or undeveloped?
Yes, vacant as not developed. There's nothing there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Addison? No? Right, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Chair. This has perhaps got to be the least prepared planning application that has come before a committee that I stood on in my years. It almost seems like the applicant said, we'd like to put 6 caravans here. What do you think? And then our planning authorities come up with, well, we'd think 19 things and these 19 conditions. You've got to do all these things. But I've heard enough from the local community to be very, very doubtful about this application. Safety, you know, the speed of the road, the access onto the road. In one sense, they're saying it's got proximity to local amenities in the village, but you're not going to walk there because there's no pavement to walk there to it. As Councillor Watt said, you wouldn't be allowed to build a house next to a sewage plant. So why would we let 6 people live next to a sewage plant? The police advice, there is police advice on 4.9, which says this land should not, however, be permitted to be used as a transient gypsy traveller site at any time. That's the advice on there. But we were not told this in our brief. It's in the literature, but we weren't told this. So how are we who's gonna control who's going onto this site then? What is it? I'm a bit concerned about the area at the back. It seems like a bit of an overspill for possibly even more residents. And as this presumably is owned by the applicant, if there was to be 10 further vans arrive and park up there, who's going to remove them? Who's going to apply for removal? You know, when we have travellers who set up sites, in unapproved locations, there's a request by the landowner to have them removed. Well, the landowner may not want to have them removed. It may be extended members of their family. And that lastly, as it brings me on to dominating the local community. There is already an attached site. There is an application, possible application for another site locally as well. I think anything like this should be done with the approval of the local community. And I think it's up to the planning authority to decide where sites are placed. We as a council have to come up with that plan. It's not up to opportunist like speculation of placement of sites like this. So I'm very doubtful about this site.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just respond
yes,
to
please.
the issue of transient and ownership. Firstly, Councillor Watt, the applicant has completed Certificate A of the planning application and has identified ownership of the site by virtue of the declaration contained in Certificate A of the planning application form. With regards to the transient nature, possibly of the site being used for, everybody with a caravan, the applicant has clearly stated that this is for 6 families. And again, we referred in the officer's report to Annex 1 of the guidance on gypsies and travellers that allows for details of the residents or the occupiers to follow as a condition. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Edward. Does anybody else have a comment? I would like to make a comment. When I'm a bit concerned about this business where we need to have the private sewage facilities should only be used where it's not reasonable. We don't seem to have anything in place before. I quite agree with Councillor Riles. We don't seem to have anything in place, and I do know the area very well, and it concerns me deeply about the sewage because there is constant flooding down that road, and the current sewage farm just about copes with what we've got. And if you start adding more and more on there and there isn't a sufficient, we don't have any details. What concerns me, I know we want to put it in, you want to put it in, the planning authority wants to put it in, the planning officers want to put it in at the end, but I feel it should become first. I think it should be the first thing that is considered for health and safety and all the other conditions that you can think of for that. It's just fundamental, basically. That does concern me that can be done as a condition, and that they should be, because I don't know whether everybody's aware of this. I don't know if Councillor Dean Biddle could come in on this and let us know what happened the other weekend. they had to put a stop notice on this because they've already started to try and build on this before. And we haven't even got the details of the sewerage.
Madam Chair, if I could, I think what I would urge you to do, with all due respect, is to consider the application before you.
Okay.
As separate from any matters that are subject of an enforcement investigation by the enforcement officer.
Well, despite that, I still am concerned that we don't have any details of any sewerage arrangements.
Yeah, and I understand your point fully, Madam Chair. I think what officers were seeking to highlight to members is that the pre-occupation condition was the preferred route for dealing with that, because that would also, that condition would never be discharged until it was to the satisfaction of the Environment Agency. But I hear what you're saying is that it perhaps shouldn't be a pre-occupation. It should be, quote unquote, a mandatory condition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. That was the word I was searching for, Edward, mandatory. Yeah. 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 Do we have any other concerns or questions from anyone? Councillor Watts. Councillor Bridget Watts.
I'm just sitting here very, very, like 300 yards away from the destruction that happened at Grettonbrook Road. And all of these things that are conditions and all of these things that have to be put in place and things, when someone's done something, it's done and it can't be undone. And giving somebody all of these conditions, if they break 4 of them, what can you do? They've already done something. It just bothers me that there's so many conditions and they're not easy things. It's not, you've got to paint every front door yellow or something like that. This is like huge conditions to do with actual infrastructure. And once once this authority's gone and it's all spun away, who's going to have control over what's going on here? Because this isn't something that is going to be completed imminently, is it? Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, with your permission.
Please come back to that, Edward, yes.
Yeah. Councillor Watt, firstly, with regards to the suggested conditions that officers have recommended as part of the recommendation for approval, should Corby Council no longer exist, it is the heirs and successors to the future council that would be duty bound to effectively ensure that those conditions will be complied with. The other thing as well, which is important to note, is that planning permission or a refusal runs with the land and not the applicant. So those conditions would be bound to the land, the subject site. Yeah, and the final point that I wanted to say is that the conditions have been set out by officers in line with government policy advice, which is that the conditions must be fair and reasonable, and they must be enforceable. So that's the test. And that's what we have sought to do as officers.
Thank you. That was thank you, Edward. Do we have anybody else who, Councillor Dalziel?
Thank you, Chair. My concern is going back to safety of access to the site. Now, the site is going to be designed for up to 6 families, and my concern would be that there would be young children on that site that would then be walking along the Ashley Road in the mornings, potentially going, because there's only one school in Cottingham, there's a sharp bend into Cottingham, no footpath, and I don't think that really some of these concerns around access to the site and the safety of people going in and out of the site have really been answered tonight. So I just wondered, Edward, if you could just come back and comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we as officers would look to the Local Highways Authority, who are the statutory consultee on issues of highway safety and the free flow of traffic without impediment. That includes pedestrian. They haven't raised any of those concerns, and they haven't raised an objection to the proposal. What they have said is suggested a series of conditions and, if you like, measures that the applicant would be required to put in place if we were minded to grant consent. And that's been formulated through these appropriate conditions, of which we've touched on. So we've always deferred to the Highways Authority. And I completely acknowledge the point that you make, but we would look to the Highways Authority, and they haven't raised those issues.
Thank you.
Chair, Councillor Addison wishes to come in. I don't know if you can see her.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Councillor Addison?
It's not a question, Chair, it's just a comment. And with respect to our officers, so often we have raised issues about highways, and highways have made no, have had no objections. But when the development, we have been right about highways so many times, and you know, we do need to take that into consideration. This is a dangerous road, and the access to the site is on the bend as far as I can see from the map, and I do think we need to give that due consideration, regardless of what the Highway Authority says.
Thank you, Councillor Addison. Sadly, what you say, I quite agree with. Many times with highways, we have been right, and highways haven't given the due diligence that we feel they should do. No disrespect to the officers. Right, do I have a mover for this? Well, what I would like to say before I move it is that if you do object, you must have sound planning reasons for this, because if we have a refusal, we may be called to account to this. So think carefully of your decisions. It looks like we've lost Councillor Brown, so she won't be able to vote because she, through technical issues, she hasn't been part of everything. I will. Does anybody want to propose for or against, or anything else? Any further comments?
Propose it's against.
Councillor Watt proposes that we are against this application. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Addison. Right, so what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll have a vote whether you're for refusing the application or against and accepting it. Councillor Watt.
For refusal.
Councillor Isles.
For.
Councillor Addison.
For refusal.
Councillor Watts.
For refusal.
Councillor DL.
For refusal.
Councillor Dady.
Yep, for refusal.
Councillor Riley. For refusal. And Kevin, what are your, Councillor Watts, what are your reasons for refusing this? Because the proposer and seconder will be.
So safety, no public footpath, environment, so that the sewage treatment is not properly defined, it's not connected to the local sewage works, domination of the local community, And just a general comment of the numbers of conditions attached to this, I think is excessive. I think there should never be 19 conditions to be satisfied. They should all be prepared when the application was submitted.
Thank you. Anybody got anything else to add? No. Right, thank you. So this application has been refused.
Chair,
We know, yes.
we've got 2 public speakers for the next item. Do you mind if I bring them into the meeting now?
Not at all. That'd be fine, Paul.
Councillor Riley.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Sorry, for medical reasons, I need to go to the toilet quite often. May I quickly go for a minute and come back?
Yes, I won't start the second item until you come back.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
while we have this short intermission,
Yes.
may I kindly ask that you crave your indulgence? The presentation for the second item
Yes.
will be in 2 parts. So my colleague Tunde will give you the description of the site and its surroundings. And then I'll move into the officer's key determining issues, and then we'll conclude with the recommendation, the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I appreciate
okay.
that. That's lovely. We'll just wait for Councillor Dady's return before we start the second item. Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just address our public speakers, if that's okay?
Yes, please do.
First of
I
all,
was just about to
apologies.
do it, but thank you.
Apologies to Mr. Etherton. I know you were in the waiting room for some time, but obviously we were dealing with the first item.
That's fine.
Can I just take a sound check, please, Mr. Etherton?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Fine, and we can hear you, so that's fine. Thank you. So the chair, Councillor Riley, will be introducing the report. When the chair has done so, the officers will present their presentation, and on completion of that, Councillor Sarah Brandt will be addressing the meeting for 3 minutes. Then Mr. Etherton will be addressing the meeting for 3 minutes, and then I will remove both Councillor Brandt and Mr. Etherton from the meeting back into the waiting room, and members will debate the application. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. And now we have Councillor Daly, we may commence. The next item is application number 20/00/484/DPA, and this is going to be presented firstly by Batunde and then by Edward. So it's a joint.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very
presentation.
much.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to share my screen.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. The application before us is application reference 2020/004884 DPA, land off Main Street, Middleton, and the proposal is for the erection of a single a dwelling with integral garage, associated vehicular access, and amenity space. This is the site location map. That is the red line showing the site location map, showing the application site. And this is the photograph of the site. The application site relates to a vacant land dominated by tall grass and a stone wall and several trees on the perimeter. The site is not leveled with the road, but raised with landscape features on the eastern and southern boundary, with the western portion is largely open. The application land previously formed part of the curtilage of Middleton House Farm and has served the property differently over many years. The site is located on the western edge of Character Area 1 within the Middleton Conservation Area. The subject site is situated on a prominent road junction in the center of the village, surrounded by several listed buildings. To the west is a Grade 2 listed building with a landmark and local interest. To the north and to the northwest, and 2 buildings classed as positive buildings to the north and east. That's the description of the site and surroundings, and the proposal is seeking planning permission to erect a 1.5-story, 3-bedroom detached dwelling with integral garage and associated vehicular access from Main Street, Middleton, including amenity space. Then I'll pass over to my colleague, Edward.
Tunde, if you could, sorry, while you're there, is show the site layout, please. Start with the first one. Sorry, go back. Yeah, yeah. So that's, Madam Chair and members, that's the red line site. And the next slide, please, slide 18. And that's a visual of the site, as you can see. It's elevated, and the topography, the land, it's contained by this low dry wall, as it were. And this is the block plan layout showing the proposed dwelling house, including the extensive hard stand. And then we have, these are the proposed floor and elevational plans. There's nothing existing to show you, and this is the indicative section through the dwelling. Okay, the principle, Madam Chair and members, is unacceptable in regards to policy 2, 8, and 11, and also critically, it conflicts with section 72 of the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act of 1990. I think what I'd like to do, Madam Chair, is just briefly give the overall unsatisfactory nature of the proposal.
Yes.
Firstly, there are concerns raised by the Highways Authority with regards to the access arrangement, and particularly on that corner. And the position of the Local Highways Authority is that the means of vehicular access is inadequate, and parking provisions would not be in accordance with the standards of the Local Highways Authority. There are mature trees. If we go back to the photo showing the site, yeah, there are mature trees which the tree officer of the local authority considers that they are worthy of a TPO. And that was the recent comments from the tree officer, who unfortunately was unwell, but saw fit to comment on this to us as officers, and I'm duty bound to express his concerns. He feels that they are worthy of retention by way of a TPO. The site is within an area identified to be at risk of surface water flooding. And fundamentally, the proposal, yeah, if you could, yeah, that's a better picture. That's a further site for, the proposal would erode the open character and appearance of this particular plot, which would be harmful to the local character, and it would be out of keeping with the conservation area. Due to the position of the subject site to the junction, the hill and Main Street, the erection of a new 2-story dwelling would diminish the verdant and open nature of this area. And this is the officer's view that this will result in significant harm, and the benefits of the proposal cannot outweigh the harm that would be resultant as a result of this proposal. So I've mentioned the fact that it doesn't comply with Section 72 of the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act of 1990. So the reasons for refusal are quite clear, members. Firstly, that the development would significantly encroach upon the historical nature of this open green landscape. And the development would result in harm to significant designated heritage assets. It doesn't comply with Section 72 of the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act. And the scale of the proposal would not integrate well with the character of the local area and the village. So by reason of design, site location, topography, and relationship with the adjacent highway, the views of officers is that the application should be refused. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Edward, and thank you, Babatunde. We now go to our first speaker, Councillor Sarah Brandt. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just a few words, really. Obviously, the Parish Council was consulted on this proposal and after consideration objected to it for similar reasons, really, to the planning officers. We felt it wasn't in keeping with the conservation area. This is an open space that sets the context, really, for historic buildings and listed buildings that surround it. It's on a three-way junction, a really unusual three-way junction with a right-angle bend. It's been the subject of surface water flooding, which I've already referred to in relation to the other case. And sadly, even this weekend, there was an accident of a car coming off that bend. It's quite a dangerous junction. And the thought of putting another entrance to a new house into that mix is really quite scary. I think that's all I'd like to say. There were also 12 objections from residents, which is quite a lot of objections from one little village. So there's quite a strength of feeling about this particularly important spot, because it is right at the very heart of the conservation area in the village. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, so we now have the second speaker, Philip Etherton.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to start, the application site was submitted as part of the 2008 Call for Sites process. However, because the site is below the 0.25 hectares threshold applied within the site selection methodology, the site cannot be allocated for development formally. The 2017 Open Space Standards study does not identify this site for designation as a local green space that adds to the form, value or character of Middleton. Part of the role of the Open Space study is to inform decisions around the need for further protect sites from future development. The application site is not identified for protection or designation. This up-to-date supplementary planning document provides significant material consideration in your decision for this application. On this basis, the optimum viable use for this part of the land is a dwelling. The 2016 Conservation Area Appraisal identifies the land outside the application site as allowing the buildings on the north side of Main Street to be brought into prominence as you approach the village coming down the hill. It is the western area outside of the application boundary where no development is proposed that has been considered the most significant contributor to the conservation area setting. The proposed development will still allow the buildings to the north side of Main Street to be brought into prominence. The landowners have also confirmed their commitment to give this remaining land into public ownership. The development has been designed to retain as many of the existing trees as possible, with a dwelling set behind the existing trees on the northern boundary. None of the trees have tree preservation orders against them. The existing landscape, combined with the proposed additional hedgerow and planting, will ensure a net gain in green landscape features. The Highways Authority and Environment Agency have no objection to this development, but have recommended conditions. The drainage and flooding allegations that the development of the site will create a flood issue are completely unsubstantiated. I was not advised an FRA should be provided when I requested the submission list during the pre-app. It is commonplace in planning for drainage designs to be prior to commencement conditions. Overall, there are no technical constraints on the site that cannot be dealt with through appropriately worded conditions. This application is seeking a solution to an underutilised parcel of land. The condition of the land will only deteriorate further and detract from the conservation area and street scene should a negative approach be taken to decision making. If sustainable infill locations, such as the application site, are not utilised, villages like Middleton will be susceptible to expansion into the open countryside in order to achieve the locally and nationally recognised need for housing. A solution to an underutilised parcel of land and the opportunity to create a village asset in perpetuity are the overwhelming benefits of this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from?
Sorry, I need to move our speakers.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just move our public speakers back into the waiting room, and you can obviously follow proceedings on YouTube. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I've just had a message from Councillor Anne Brown. She's tried 3 times to log in, but she can't log in with sound, so has given up. Right, do we have any queries, questions? Councillor Dady.
Thank you. I'll just maybe lower my hand. There we are. Right. Yes, I'm a bit confused in a way. Clarification on this. We're told this is on a bend and access from the house on a bend, and it's open land and so on. Actually, according to this map, where the house is being built isn't that open land on the bend, and where the house would be, there's trees there anyway, according to the photos. And so the house would be behind the trees, the open land would still be there, and the driveway wouldn't be on a bend. So I don't quite understand all of that. Secondly, Edward mentioned, I can't remember his exact quote, but the driveway area wasn't in keeping with the plan or the proximity to other areas. Something I'm not sure exactly what he said about driveway, but I'm wondering what the problem is with the driveway area. Obviously, it provides adequate parking for that house, so I don't know why there's a problem with it. So those are 2 things I'd like clarification on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dady. Madam Chair, may I respond?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, Councillor Dady, firstly, I think you need to look at the overall development, the nature of the overall scheme. It's not just the siting of the house, but it's the access, the vehicular access to the subject dwelling that creates concerns for the Highways Authority on that bend. And the Highways Authority are quite clear. And they say that, you know, if you could just bear with me 1 minute, the Highways Authority are quite clear in that they talk about the nature of that bend, and I want to refer you to paragraph 10 of the officer's report. It's quite detailed. They set it out.
I could come in on this because I have local knowledge. That is the water whooshes down around that bend, and cars do come round that bend. Although it's not on the bend, Councillor Dady, people would come round on that bend, and it would be blind. The people coming out of their house would be, because of where the thing is, they would be blind, and there could be quite serious accidents.
Yeah,
I see that myself, because if they come out of that and turn right, just as a car is coming round the bend, that could cause an accident quite easily.
Councillor,
that's just the layman's version.
No, Madam Chair, you did well. I think you've drawn my attention to the point that I wanted to address for the benefit of Councillor Dady. Proposed development will be served, this is quoting the Highways Authority, by a new vehicular access off Main Street. Road layout for the Hill, Ashley Road and Main Street is evidenced by what they call historic priority changes, making the main route from the Hill to Main Street, leaving Ashley Road as a give-way junction.
That's right, yeah.
This is important as it means that the main route now bends instead of lying straight as it once did. So the local highways standards include forward visibility, which run on the inside vehicular track around the bend. Yeah. In the scenario that I've just presented, 25 meters. Lines are then drawn across the bend, joining the start and end point of the 25-meter bend line. So there are quite clearly problems of visibility and the envelope.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Dady? We can't hear you. We can't hear you, Councillor Dady.
Sorry, I pressed the unmute button. I didn't press it for long enough, I think. Right. Yes, I did want some clarification on what Edward mentioned about the actual parking arrangements for the house as well, what the problem is with that.
Okay, firstly, the Highways Authority's view is that the proposed garage associated with this development is substandard in size, and it cannot count as a parking space on a dwelling with less than 4 bedrooms. And the view of the Highways Authority is that, the garage is no better than a shed, effectively tacked onto this dwelling. 3 cycle parking spaces would be required, and there is a shortfall of on-site parking. And I think in general planning terms, you see the site is fairly open. There is a range of natural foliage and vegetation that adds to the character of the village. It's open, unencroached by any erected buildings. What you're going to have is an extensive measure of hard standing, both to allow vehicular access and footpath to the front of what is now effectively vegetation that allows you to get that sense of not a rural idyll, but the sense of place that you are within a village.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Councillor Watt.
Yeah, it just seems that any development in this location would be out of keeping with the village itself. Looking on Google Street View, you can see that it is a very old rural setting. The buildings, the stone, the very old engineering brick type buildings, and anything built here, really has to look like it is 150 years old. A bit disappointing that the applicant is talking about the state of the present area. Again, looking back on Google Street View, I can see in 2009 it was a very well kept garden, enhancing the area. The images that we've been presented now look like the back of the Bondo, and I can only surmise that's to reinforce the application.
So that was a comment really rather than a question. Thank you. Councillor Addison.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a comment this time, in that Highways seem to have got this one right. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further? Councillor Dalziel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a comment really. My concern really is if there is inadequate parking on the site, then it's going to attract on-street parking for visitors to that home or people who live there. That is a particularly bad bend, and I think having cars parked along that part of Main Street really is an accident waiting to happen, particularly with the right turn into Ashley Road, and I just don't think that would be acceptable really.
Thank you. Any more comments? If not, would we do I have a proposer for refusal of this? Councillor Addison, and a seconder, Councillor Dalziel, and I'll go through everybody in person. So if you're for refusal, Councillor Addison, or against?
For refusal.
Councillor Watts? Bridget Watts?
For refusal.
Councillor Isles? Unmute, please.
I will, for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor DL?
For refusal.
Councillor Anthony Dady?
Against refusal.
Councillor Watt?
For refusal.
Councillor Riley for refusal. Thank you. That concludes that application. We support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we've no speakers on the next point, so I will go straight on to the next point. 20/00517/REG3, the installation of a 12-metre CCTV cabinet-based column and camera and Wi-Fi equipment on the grassed area by the amphitheatre on Kestrel Road, Prize Hall, and installation of a 1.6-metre cabinet-based column on the retail area of Kestrel Road, Prize Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will quickly share my screen.
Thank you, Vijana.
Thank you. Yeah. So this application is 20/00517/REG3. This has come to the committee due because this is a council application. The application is for the installation of a 12-metre CCTV cabinet-based column camera and Wi-Fi equipment near the amphitheatre on Kestrel Road, and also this comprises installation of 3 long 6-metre cabinet-based column and 2 lamp-style columns and cameras within the retail area of the Prize Hall Zone 1. So this is the aerial view from where you can see the amphitheatre location. And this is the district center proposed in Prize Hall Zone 1. So the site plan clearly shows the 12-metre CCTV column. This is the red point which shows where the 12-metre CCTV column is proposed. And this site plan shows 3 long 6-metre columns within the retail area. One will be here, and the second will be here, and number 3 will be here. This slide shows some of the cabinet-based standard poles. And these are the cabinet-based pole foundation specification. This slide also shows the foundation specification for lamp standard pole. So this is the site photograph standing on Kestrel Road, looking towards north, where you can see the residential dwellings. And this is another site photograph looking to the amphitheater, and you can see some residential dwellings, which falls to the southern part. So the key issues here is the principle of development, design and character, and neighboring amenity. The principle of development is considered acceptable because it will enhance the overall safety of the area and in accordance with Joint Core Strategy and the National Planning Policy Framework. In terms of design and character, the proposed CCTV columns feature the standard urban area CCTV column. This will be painted in black and will be galvanized pole. In terms of neighboring amenity, letters were sent to 31 neighboring units and no objection has been received, no objection or no representation. And due to the siting and height, it is considered that the proposal will not cause any detrimental impact to the nearby neighboring units. Besides, environmental health officer and the crime prevention officer has been consulted on the application. They have not raised any objection or any concern. So overall, the proposed scheme is considered acceptable and the officer's recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Fajana. Do we have any comments or questions on this? Councillor Watt and Councillor Addison.
Just one comment. I was pleased to see that they're going to be painted black. The galvanised external material wasn't very attractive, and it is just a comment that they're very utilitarian. They're not very attractive. In future, perhaps there could be a more aesthetics design that enhances the street scene than departs from it.
Thank you. Councillor Addison.
I agree, Councillor Watt. I think they could be a bit more imaginative with their design on street furniture. I'd like to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Councillor Isles, seconded. Councillor Addison, you're for the supporting this application?
Yes, Chair.
For or against, Councillor Watts? Bridget Watts?
For.
Councillor Bob Isles, for or against?
For.
Councillor DL, for or against?
For.
Councillor Daly, for or against?
For.
Councillor Kevin Watt, for or against?
For.
And Councillor Julie Riley, for. So this application has been upheld. And now move swiftly on to item 4, 20/00537/REG3, upgrade of the current BMX track.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will again share my screen.
Thank you.
Thank you. This application 20/00537/REG3 is for upgrading the existing BMX track to provide an accessible, digitally compliant and learn to ride pump track, which would not be weather dependent. So this is the location plan where you can see the red line boundary and the existing track within it. This is the aerial view of the location where you can see the site is bounded by the existing skate park to the south, the Slimming World West Glebe Pavilion and the West Glebe Car Park to the southeast, and the open space to the north, and the line of mature trees to the west. So this is the site photograph where you can see the existing track, mud track, and also you can see the skate park and the Slimming World building. The next slide shows the view to the west where you can see the line of mature trees. So this is the proposed site plan. This site plan indicates that there will be two BMX track. One will be for the intermediate users and the other one to the south will be for the beginners. And there is also a ramp proposed, which is to comply with the DDA Act. So this is the proposed elevation looking to the north from the skate park. This elevation shows us looking to the southeast. This elevation is towards the southwest from the existing path. So the key issues here are the principle of development, design and character, and neighboring amenity. The principle of development is considered acceptable because it is upgrading the existing facility within the locality. In terms of design and character, The proposal will comprise an intermediate track along with a beginner's track to the south. It will be surfaced with modern bitumen macadam with grass seeded sites. The existing facility is a mud track and only functional in dry weather. The proposal will upgrade the facility and will not be weather dependent, and it will be useful in any weather condition. The proposed scheme is therefore acceptable and in accordance with the Joint Core strategy in terms of design and character. In terms of neighboring amenity, the subject site is located within the Westglebe Park. The nearest residential dwelling is located approximately 86 meters from the site, and it is considered acceptable. The distance is considered acceptable. Moreover, the subject site is largely screened by mature trees along northwest side. Overall, no detrimental harm has been identified due to the proposed scheme. Therefore, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Fajana. Do I have any queries, comments from any councillors? Councillor Addison?
I think this is a very good idea, Chair. The skate park and playground are well used in normal times, and anything that increases people's, or gives people an opportunity to get out and get on their bike, as Mr. Tebbit once said, then must be encouraged. So yes, I welcome this, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watt?
I also wanted to say that it's just fabulous, and the kids are going to have a wonderful time, and how great that we're renewing the pavilion. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I quite agree. I think it's lovely to think that they can use it under all weathers. And there's facilities for a ramp, and there's beginners, and I think it's been really well thought out. Councillor Kevin Watt?
Yeah, there's been many improvements in Westglebe. It's a well-used community resource now. When Parkrun gets back, hopefully soon, we've enhanced the pavements there. It's a valuable addition to leisure in Corby.
Absolutely. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Addison, seconded Councillor Isles. Councillor Addison, you're for this proposal? Or against?
For, Chair, for.
Councillor Bridget Watts? For or against?
For.
Councillor Isles, for or against?
For the proposal.
Councillor Alison Diel, are you for or against the proposal?
For.
Councillor Anthony Dady, are you for the proposal?
For.
Councillor Kevin Watt, you're for the proposal?
For.
Councillor Julie Riley also is for the proposal, so it's passed unanimously. And that concludes the end of the meeting. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to all the officers for their time and expertise, and to everyone who attended tonight, and feel sorry for poor councillor that kept ducking in and out. Bless her, she tried her best. So keep safe, everybody, and thank you.